Are you just starting out with Gartner and a little bit overwhelmed with the amount of information that exists? Access to over 2,000 plus analysts, multiple types of engagements, and really unsure as how to get a good start in the relationship. So if you are a small to medium-sized enterprise vendor and your goal is to influence Gartner in referencing your company or your product or your services in future research, you're in the right place. Okay, so the goal on the channel is to make dealings with Gartner easier for small to medium-sized enterprises. And we will do that by looking at the most common dealings or engagements or touch points that you will have with Gartner and the key challenges that you will have to face in each. And what the videos will do, they will articulate these key challenges and give you recommendations so you'll have a clarity in regards to pragmatic next steps moving forward. Okay, so let's take a look at some of those common or most common dealings that you will have with Gartner, and these will be the subject of some of the videos that we will look at on the channel. So for example, how do you close a contract that makes sense for your organization? You'll find that closing a contract with Gartner can be very stressful, to say the least, and it's a big take on for small to medium size enterprises. It's a big investment. There's lots of pieces to the puzzle. The contracts can be quite complex. So, how do you close a contract that makes sense for your organization? How do you run your first engagement with an analyst? And engagements can be varied. They can be, there's inquiries, there's vendor briefings, and there's document reviews, there's face-to-face. So there's multiple types of engagements, and we will break down, each one of these, what they are, what's the purpose of each, what goals you should set. But specifically, how do I run my first engagements? Because, it's, first impressions last, you want to get it right. So we'll look at the various inputs there on running your first engagement. How do you prepare your vendor briefing? So this is between those engagements that we just mentioned. The vendor briefing is very, very important when looking to influence research and getting your product or your service referenced in a specific research or a specific publication. So a very important type of engagement, and one that requires probably multiple videos on how you schedule, how you prepare, how you execute, and how you follow up on vendor briefings. So how do you get the most out of your contract, from a short, medium, long-term perspective? How do you deal with analysts? One of the pros of Gartner's is that you have access to over 2,000 plus. It's maybe more in the 2,500 plus range at this stage. So how do you go about establishing relationships with analysts from a short-term perspective, a mid-term perspective, and strategically from a long-term perspective? How do you get published? Obviously, that's one of the big points of contention for the majority of companies that invest in Gartner. So how do you go about doing that? There's, again, short-term, mid-term, long-term. Which analysts do you identify and who do you try to influence? How do you do that through different types of engagements? So we'll break that down into, smaller digestible pieces. So how do you get published? And how do you renew your contract as well? Getting a contract that makes sense for your organization is a tricky process. If you are in it, you will no doubt know. But renewing your contract is also a very difficult process as well, and we'll break that down, timelines, understanding multiple services that could be sort of thrown into your contract can be difficult to understand, the pieces of the puzzle. So we'll address all of these dealings in specific videos, and in some cases in multiple videos on the channel. So why listen to Darragh Kelly? Why listen to his point of view? Okay, so some statistics about me in regards to my dealings with Gartner over the years, and that starts with let's say the time period. So I've had dealings with Gartner, well over a decade now, and I've done that at 3 different SME cybersecurity vendors. But in addition to those 3 organizations, I've also helped between, maybe 7 to 10 other organizations, more from a sort of an advisory sort of standpoint. Peers of mine that will be in the industry, the cybersecurity industry, and also within other industries that are, nothing to do with my background, but has been effective and helpful to them. So in that time period, well over 10 years, I've had dealings with over 90 analysts. And that's not just simple one-touch dealings, which could be, just one engagement, one face-to-face, one vendor briefing. This would be over a period of time, so sort of a mid, short-term, medium-term, long-term relationships that I've held with over 90 analysts. And in that time period, I've run over 300 engagements. So engagements being the broad range of engagements. So you would have a document review, you could have inquiries, vendor briefings, face-to-face. I've also been involved in roundtable discussions at Gartner conferences, actually going to the conferences as well. So let's say the broad gamut of engagements, and I've done over 300 of them in that time period. All of that has culminated in publications. Okay, it's something that we're all interested in on these videos is, how do I influence to get published? Although I do believe there's a lot more value to be had than just influencing and getting published. However, all of that work has culminated in, over a dozen publications at the companies that I have been at. Okay, so that is sort of my background, that is my experience. So the goal on the channel is to make dealings with Gartner easier for small to medium-sized enterprises, vendors, whether you have product or whether you have service. So here we will be addressing the most common dealings or touch points that you will have with Gartner, the key challenges that you will face, and we'll give you some recommendations to give you clarity on very pragmatic ways of moving forward with Gartner. So welcome everybody to the channel, and let's get started.